This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, hello and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. I'm Harry Wilkinson, and this is the show where we take a look at days and weeks events, happenings in the world, happenings where you are locally, across the country, in the areas of politics, in the areas of technology, in the areas of education, anything and everything that affects us and that we hear about through our various connections to the media. And we take a look at it from a higher perspective. We take a look at it in a way that neutralizes or perhaps protects us from stressors, because undue stress or unmanaged stress, I think, is the biggest wellness issue that anyone has. And with the kinds of news stories that permeate the atmosphere these days, with the kinds of things we hear about, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So, using this technique of taking the step back and changing your perspective is a way of managing stressful situations. And it doesn't just have to be news stories or things happening out in the world that stress you out or cause you concern. This is a technique that works equally as well with anything that you are going through on a personal level in your life. We are often programmed to respond to things in ways that may not be the healthiest choice. But what we learn when we expand and we take that step back, what we learn is that we don't have to respond in those rather pre-programmed ways. Now, we've talked a lot on this show about the fight or flight response that is often triggered without us really knowing that that's what's happening. This causes stress, and this causes a reaction in the body for it to basically shut down. So the immune system becomes very limited because energy is being pushed to the areas of protection, self-protection, which has the effect of shutting down the immune system to a great degree, so that energy is available for the fight or the flight, whichever one is going to be chosen. And these days, so many things, just driving in traffic for many of us, can trigger a fight or flight response without us really understanding that's what's going on. So we've talked about that, and we've talked about how we counter that with the relaxation response. And these are all part of the tools that we use in managing stress. Now, my particular perspective is a metaphysical one, and I'm fully aware that not everybody agrees with it. However, I have found even those that may disagree or are kind of puzzled by the concepts that I mention, find something worthy in it, worthwhile, something helpful, practical, in which to help deal with perspective. So My perspective, as I said, is a metaphysical one. The idea that we are more than our physical bodies, our ego selves, if you will, that we are part of a universal mind. Divine mind is what I usually use. And that as spiritual beings, in that sense, we are creating everything in the world around us. Everything that the ego self goes through is a creation, because at that highest level, at that metaphysical level, we don't experience the sorts of things that one experiences on the ego level, on the level of the mundane, if you will. Thrilling experiences, frightening experiences, experiences of doubt and loss and grief. We have none of those because we know that they are illusions at that highest level. And so by creating situations for our little avatars, our little ego selves to encounter and work through and rise above, expands us, expands that ego being, if you will, and reconnects. I think, and this is it's more than an idea, it's more like a possibility, or something that has been presented to me in meditation. I can't say where it comes from, but what I can say is that it's a vision of future selves in humanity, who we are evolving to become. And what we're evolving to become, just in a nutshell, because this idea, this was presented to me, this vision that was presented to me is very vivid, and I could go on and on and on about the details, but just to bottom line it, we are evolving into beings of energy and light more than beings of the kinds of atomic physical substance that we're used to. Just to put it that way. I don't want to get too science fiction-y on for you. For those people who aren't quite into that sort of thing. But that is where we're growing and expanding. It's an ability to, I think, ultimately be on this earth, in this earth, in this realm, if you will, as something quite different than what we experience now. The idea that our spirituality, our sense of connectedness, our sense of what spirituality is, continues to evolve. And so, by using these wellness tools, I think we hasten that. But certainly the only thing to be concerned with is one-on-one how you deal with it, and your own expansion, and your own awareness. The more connected anybody feels to the world around them, the healthier we are. I mean, there's plenty of studies that show that people who feel connected to community, to family, to a home environment, or maybe even a work environment that is very warm and friendly, and that you feel connected to. That sense of connection brings a sense of wellness, brings a relaxation state that helps the immune system. This is what most of our technology these days, our Web 2.0 technologies, including, social networks like Facebook. What is it about? It's all about connection. It's all about realizing connection. And internet access, social media are physical manifestations, and quite amazing ones, I have to say, of that connectedness that we are. We are literally manifesting physically a parallel, or at least a version in miniature of our true connectedness. That's what the internet is. That's why it's an amazingly important shift. If you're someone like me who, lived quite a bit of life before the internet came along, and you look back on it and you think about it and you look around you, mindfully aware, if you will, and you wonder how you ever got along without it. I mean, the most important concepts, the most important steps in our evolution are like that, where you can't possibly imagine how anyone ever got along before these things came. But they did, of course. But it becomes so integrated into your daily experience. It becomes so much of a part of what we are and what we're becoming, that it just seems very naturally like it's always been there. The same thing, for many other inventions or new discoveries, with the telephone, for instance. Now, I'm not old enough to remember when the telephone was not around, but from stories from people who did experience that transition, it was life-changing, and then all of a sudden it was like something that you could not do without. Same thing when radio became something that many folks could access. It was another form of connection that people embraced so completely that, again, they couldn't think of how you would operate without that invention. Television did the same thing. I venture to say, and I'm not a great historian or anything like that, I'd have to turn to some historians to find out, but I imagine when the printing press came to be and books began to be printed, well, that changed everything in a way that, again, so fully embraced, no one could even contemplate what it would be like without books. But there was great civilization before books, before the printing press. History has it, or so I've heard, that the Greek philosopher Aristotle had great concern when he saw that written language was starting to take root, that people could write things down. Because up until that time, history had all been about oral communication and memory.